News.
And now on your screen is Nevin Adams. He is with the Employee Benefit Research Institute. A recent report out by his group led the Wall Street Journal paper earlier this month. Here's the story. Worker savings too little to retire. Mr. Adams, is America ready to retire?
Well, as you might expect with most things, some people are, some people aren't, and most people don't really have a good sense of it. So we're still in the sort of, it's a little ways off. We'll figure it out eventually.
What do you mean by good sense?
Well, most people we find still haven't ever made even a single attempt to figure out what they need to live on in retirement. And more than half have not even guessed at how much they might need to. Sometimes you wonder if we didn't conduct the survey every year, if this group of people at least has stopped long enough to think about it. Most people haven't.
How many Americans, what percentage of Americans did you find have retirement savings, and what kind of retirement savings?
Well, we've got about 2/3 of Americans that we surveyed, and it's about 1,000 people, about 250 retirees, say that they are currently saving something for retirement. About 80% of the people we surveyed are currently participating in some form of an employer-based plan. So, that's a majority, but it's not everyone, and obviously that's some cause for concern.
So, if somebody is turning 62, 65 years old, how much money do they need to have? How much cash would you recommend they have?
Well, sadly, that's as variable as the individuals we might be talking to, because it's a matter of, where are you living and where do you plan to live? How much are you living on now? And how much of that would you like to continue living on? What other sources of income do you have? Do you own your home, for instance? Social Security's there for most people. Do you have a pension from a current employer? Have you accumulated any savings at all? So what it ends up being, unfortunately, is this huge "it depends," which I think frustrates a lot of people because they'd like somebody to just tell them a number. But the reality is it depends on how you want to live your life. You might just as well say to somebody, well, how much do you want to make? And people might tell you, I'd like to make $1 million. But they adjust that for reality. They don't expect that they'll actually get $1 million. So it's a function of what are you qualified to do, the job market, where you're living, those kind of things. Retirement's just as complicated.
Now, Nevin Adams is our guest, again, with the Employee Benefit Research Institute. We're talking about U.S. workers and retirement savings. Divided our lines just a little bit differently today. We did it by age group. So you can see the numbers there on the screen. If you're 25 and under, call that top line. Those between the ages of 26 and 64, 202-585-3881 is a number for you to call. And finally, if you are 65 and older, 585-3882. And we'll begin taking those calls in just a minute. Let's look at this by age group. We're dividing our first line by 25 and under. What's the savings rate amongst that group?
Well, again, it's going to depend on where you want to end up. But the great thing is when you're at the youngest age is you've got a lot of time working on your side. Now, the bad news is at that stage you're usually not making as much money as you are later on, and you've got a lot of other things that you'd like to spend your money on: a car, apartment, that first mortgage, a new stereo. There are a lot of interesting, young people have always had trouble sort of making retirement a priority. That's not really a new trend. But if you can start when you're young, it's a really good time because it accumulates over time and it really works on your behalf. The short answer to that question is if you've got a workplace, a retirement plan at work, a 401k, for instance, you want to start right away, and you probably want to start at least, the employers frequently match that. So every dollar you put in, they'll put in a percentage too. Matching up to 6% of your pay is a common one. So you certainly want to do that much. Beyond that, I would say as much as you can, as early as you can, then it just gets easier later on.
Nevin Adams, the next group, 26 to 64.
Yeah. Well, that's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? Because that's the point where a lot of our discretionary spending, if you will, sort of tightens up. That's when you have to deal with things like, paying for the kids' college education. These days, increasingly, it's the point in time in which your parents begin to sort of call on you and need your help and assistance and things like that. On the other hand, that's a stretch too where particularly at the tail end of it, where people's discretionary income begins to free up a little bit. So for instance, when you get those kids in college, you can take the money that you've been setting aside to help deal with that and funnel it over to your own retirement. When essentially saving for retirement is putting aside money so that you can pay yourself later on. And the question at some point is, how much do you want to be paid when you're in retirement?
Do federal laws encourage savings, encourage people to save for retirement?
Yes, they do. And one of the most common promotions you'll hear in the workplace is, people will tell you about the advantages of pre-tax saving. So it's not just, the first thing is you put money into the plan and the employer will put some in on your behalf. So that's an instant return of sorts. And the second thing is the advantage, particularly with a 401k or even 403b in the public sector or 457 for government workers, is that with the money you put in, you do not have to pay federal taxes on it until such time as you take it out. So that's an advantage. It's an advantage to the worker because, let's say, you contribute $100 out of your paycheck. Well, that really only feels like you're taking out about, let's say, 80% because you're not actually having to pay taxes on that money right then. So it feels like you're saving more than it actually feels like you're saving because you do get that tax advantage. Now, sooner or later, you have to pay it back. When you pull the money out of these plans, you do, in fact, pay taxes on it. And a lot of the focus here in Washington lately has been this notion that people, that tax advantage is a giveaway. But in fact, with retirement plans, it's just it's basically a giveaway for a little while, and then as people pull the money out, money will come back in the form of taxes.
Nevin Adams, do most 65 years old and older folks rely on Social Security more than their own savings?
Yes. And they probably always have. And for the near term, based on the savings we've seen, I think they will continue to do so. I mean, without question, if we didn't have Social Security in place these days, we would have a massive retiree living problem, crisis, whatever. It is a major source of funding for a huge number of people. And it's all of the funding for a segment of the population. So it matters.
So it's always been that way, though?
Well, since Social Security has been around, yes. I mean, if you think about it, not so long ago, retirement was an issue we worried about because it didn't last very long. Many people didn't even get to the retirement age of 65 or whatever, and who decided that 65 was the right day to quit, age to quit working anyway. So once upon a time, and not so long ago, people didn't retire at all. Then we got into a mode where people are in fact retiring, and they're able to retire, and to some extent encouraged to retire by programs like Social Security, because it does provide a form of sustenance, and because of programs like pensions and even 401ks that give people the financial wherewithal to continue to pull in a paycheck after they quit working.
Nevin Adams is our guest. Our topic, U.S. workers and retirement savings. And Susan, who is in her 50s, is calling from Fort Myers, Florida. Hi, Susan.
Hey, listen, I've got a trust fund that's worth about $1.1 million. I'm 54 years old this year. And I'm worried I'm going to run out of money before I die. And, of course, I have no health care or anything like that. And all this is of great consternation. I know you act like $1 million is a lot of money, but I know personally it's not very much. And I do own my own home, but I have fees attached to my condo. And, it is expensive to live. And I'm worried I'm going to run out of money.
Susan, do you pull money out of that trust? Do you have full access to it?
Well, right now, it's the trust is assigned to me. My folks are still alive, but they're in their late 80s, and so it's not going to last forever. And there is money coming in on a monthly basis to that. And a lot of it's in annuities, and a lot of it's in the stock market. So given what the stock market value is, it could range anywhere from $1.5 million to $1 million.
Nevin Adams.
Well, the good news is, to your point, $1 million can go rather quickly, particularly if you have large medical expenses. So that's obviously an issue. But at $1 million, you have more than a lot of other people have to draw on, and your house, that your residence that you own, that's also a good thing as well. So you're in a better starting point relative to a lot of people. Your point that $1 million goes quickly is a good one. What I tell people is, if you think about how old you are, if you get to the point in time when you're 65 years old, your odds of living another 20 years are actually pretty good. And so you take whatever sum you have set aside, in your case $1 million, you say, okay, that's got to last me 20 years. So do the math simply. don't worry about inflation and all those kind of adjustments. And you can see, to your point, how quickly that $1 million goes away, and how modest an income stream it might be for your retirement period. So you're wise to keep that in mind. Again, the thing is, and you've still got some years ahead of you before that time, and hopefully before you start drawing into that. Obviously, that's an opportunity for that portfolio to grow, and also an opportunity for you to perhaps set aside some other kind of funds or income or something like that to help it grow as well.
Are rising life expectations hurting Social Security funding?
Sure. And I say that, I hesitate only because it's like if people are living longer, then that means that commitment from Social Security to pay them a certain amount of money every month will have to be stretched out over a longer period of time. That obviously means, unlike the early days when Social Security was first set up, you've got a situation where a lot more people are going to be drawing on that fund, whereas, back at a certain point in time, people were perhaps not around to collect it. I know, for instance, my father died, just about 10 years into retirement, so he didn't keep drawing on that funds. But there are people who live longer than the expected rate, and that obviously creates the challenge.
So do you see policy changes coming down the road? And what's the confidence level of people in Social Security?
Well, people have not been very confident in Social Security in our recent survey, and that's been relatively consistent over time. Now, we asked the question, how confident do you feel, not about Social Security's existence, but its continued ability to pay the kinds of benefits that people are getting now? And I think certainly in the context of the dialogue that's going on here in Washington, I think people are concerned that one way or another, either I'll be made to wait longer, or there'll be some sort of cost of living adjustment or some sort of inflation adjustment, that one or all of those things will translate into a lower Social Security benefit. So people have those kind of concerns about Social Security out into the future. That's not really a new thing. I mean, it's interesting. I had a discussion with my children a few years ago when they first entered the workforce, and they were not very happy at the amount of money going out of their paycheck for Social Security, particularly since they said, I'll never see any of this back anyway. And I was happy to remind them that I said exactly the same thing as they did at their age to my parents. And yet, as I sit here today, I've got a completely different perspective on my ability to draw some of that money out. Now, concerns, long-term funding, adjustments, all those kind of things, yes, those are all there, those are all real. But I would just say the concerns about Social Security are not new.
Geneva, Sarasota, Florida, 18 years old. Hi, Geneva.
Hi.
You ready to retire?
Not quite yet. My comment was about the Social Security. Seeing as I'm only 18 and I know that the baby boomers are about to retire and take advantage of all of Social Security opportunities, I was just wondering, if I would have anything to take advantage of once I reach retirement age.
It's hard to say. I mean, it gets back to the conversation we were saying earlier. And I would say when I was 18, I would have put the odds at me getting Social Security at slim and none. And honestly, the way that I viewed it as I went through my working career and my savings career was I always tried to view it as not something I was going to count on, but rather something, it would be gravy, it would be extra. And so if it was there, and I have hopes that it will be, then it would be a cushion as opposed to something I was completely dependent on. And I think that's probably the best way to look at it. A lot of people end up having to depend on Social Security for a majority of their income. In some cases, I said earlier, as a primary source of income. But I don't think they necessarily planned that when they started out. So know that it's there. Keep an eye on it. Be concerned about it. But at some point, it's a cushion.
Geneva, do you work? Do you go to school?
I do go to school. I go to school and work, actually.
Okay. Do you think, you're 18, do you think you're going to have Social Security when you turn 65? Do you think there's going to be money put into your account every month?
I surely hope so. But the way the economy is looking now, and seeing as the baby boomers are the majority of our population, I'm not quite sure about it.
And We appreciate your time this morning. Speaking of the large baby boom population, they're just starting now to retire. That also creates a real political force, doesn't it, to have all these baby boomers on Social Security? Does that pretty well ensure the program for at least the next 20 years?
Well, you know, older Americans have always been a very powerful voting bloc, and even when they weren't a numerical majority, they tended to vote in numbers that got that result anyway. So yeah, I'm sure that's there. On the other hand, the numbers that I've seen about the millennials, the so-called Gen Y, I think, although they don't get talked about the same way baby boomers have, I think they're going to be about as big and probably about as vocal. And I think you can already see that showing up as they come into the workforce and into the voting booth. And so that will be perhaps a counterbalance, although, as I said, I encourage my children to keep me in mind when they think about things.
Next call for Nevin Adams comes from Rochester, Minnesota, from Ida in her 70s, early 70s. Hi, Ida.
Hi. Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I am in Rochester because I am a patient at Mayo Clinic for lung cancer. I never smoked, by the way. And I saved, thinking my husband and I, will have a longevity because we have a nice life and obey all the rules of keeping healthy. And we say, but when you are attacked by a terminal disease like this, the expenses, the medical expenses are outrageous. Medicare helps, but you cannot depend on Medicare. You have to pay a lot out of your own pocket. And, my bank account is depleted. And what I am very concerned is that most people are not aware of that. Especially I'm concerned about the pharmaceutical expenses. It's really great. Insurance don't want to pay for the drugs that you need. And you have to really, fight with the insurance that you have been paid all your life. Private insurance, my husband and I have. But it is really a struggle.
Ida?
And it affects your health.
Ida, can we ask how much your illness has cost you personally?
Jesus Christ. You wouldn't believe, but I have paid more than $100,000, and I still owe the clinic, and I'm paying.
Has it changed your retirement plans? I mean, the loss of that amount of money?
Of course. It's upside down. I mean, thank God I'm a woman of faith, and I have faith, and my children are helping. But, you feel guilty that your children are helping you because you plan, but then you have to be open to whatever happens in life, And I had the great American optimism. I'm from Puerto Rico, an American citizen from Puerto Rico. And thank you for letting me explain what worries me.
That was Ida calling from the Mayo Clinic. Mr. Adams?
What Ida is talking about is a great point to highlight. Interestingly enough, the Retirement Confidence Survey actually showed that people were more confident about their ability to handle basic expenses in retirement than they were about health care or long-term care. And those can be huge expenses, and people were concerned about it. And they are more concerned about Medicare's funding and sustainability than they were about Social Security, for instance. So, it's a great point. And I think a lot of people assume, and I alluded to this, that Medicare pays more than it actually does, than it actually able to. So, again, those are all sort of important issues. We know when we've modeled out people's projections into retirement to see how many people are going to run short, that the cost of long-term care, as well as health care, can have a devastating impact on somebody's portfolio. And so while everyone's not stricken with a need to fund long-term care, when it does hit you, it can take, as she said, it can take your retirement plan and turn it all the way upside down.
What about added insurance or supplemental insurance plans? Are those beneficial to people like Ida?
Absolutely.
She bought it earlier.
Although it's gotten more difficult to find those kind of policies these days, because again, the economics of providing that sort of insurance over an extended period of time with some of the variables we're looking at in healthcare now has made it more problematic. But But in terms of looking at those kind of risk heading on into retirement, I think like anything else, that's something, if you don't buy some kind of insurance, you basically are self-insuring, which is to say, you're going to have to come up with the money. And the way the expenses are for some of those treatments, it really is something that's very difficult to fund.
Daryl tweets into you, Mr. Adams, can you speak to the disappearance of defined benefit pensions and the rise of defined contribution plans?
Sure. That's, again, not a new trend, something that's been going on for a while. And frequently you hear people talk about, the 401k is just not as good as the old pension plan. I wish we all had a pension plan. And in a lot of ways, given what a defined benefit pension plan could provide, certainly in the private sector, that was a program you might well look forward to, because, again, for most workers in the private sector, you didn't have to put any money in. The employer put money in. The employer worried about managing the monies, and once you got to the point in retirement, you would collect a paycheck. Usually, and I say usually the way the plans were designed, if you met all the criteria, and if you worked for that employer 20, 25, 30 years, you could look to get, perhaps 60%, 66% of your income. That's a pretty good deal. The problem is very few people ever actually worked that long for any single employer. And that's true going all the way back to World War II. Again, one of the other things that my kids tend to think is that we've just invented this job changing all the time thing. And in point of fact, we've been doing this for a long time. So I'll use a personal example. My first employer had a pension plan. I worked there for 9 years. Not exactly a high turnover. At the end of 9 years, I walked away. I had a nice 401k balance. I had zero in pension. Why? Because at that point in time, I had not worked long enough to accumulate any pension. My second employer, I worked for 13 years. Again, I'm not exactly a high turnover kind of guy. We had a pension plan. And what I walked away with at that point in time, after 13 years there, because I was relatively young still, was a pension that when I retire, when I'm in 65, I can look forward, I think, to about $2,500 a year.
A year?
A year. Now, that's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. And certainly, given, planning and everything, it's nice to have a regular, reliable source of income. So my point on the whole pension thing was, it's a good design, but people, most of us, only about 10, maybe 15% of Americans ever in the private sector, outside of a couple of industries, ever put in the kind of time that would allow you to get from those plans what they were capable of producing. So where, I, like many other people, say, well, geez, it'd be nice to have a pension kind of thing. The reality is, for most Americans, A, they never had one, and B, the ones that had one typically haven't walked away with enough to replace the kind of income they were capable of producing, because we changed jobs. So,
Nevin Adams, Right Wing, tweets in, Social Security is a sorry excuse for a retirement plan. Americans should be encouraged to have real annuity plans.
Real annuity plans, huh?
Or annuity plans.
Oh. Well, there's a lot of different ways to look at Social Security, and as I said earlier, I don't tend to view it as a retirement plan, and even on a personal level, I don't look at it as being sort of a primary thing. It's in the back of my head. I hope it's there, and I consider it to be a nice cushion, and it might be the difference between poverty and not. But as I look at those kind of things, to me, it's kind of a social insurance program. You're paying for insurance. You hope you get your money out. You buy car insurance. Are you going to get all that money back? Yes, if you have a really bad accident. But we insure against certain life events to insulate us from the result. So I think that looking at Social Security as a retirement plan I'd look at it a little differently.
What about these products that are out there where you can give a company X number of dollars and they say, okay, for the rest of your life, we'll give you a monthly stipend? Are those popular products? Are they for a certain income level?
Well, that's what we used to call a pension. And in fact, that's really what a pension is. An annuity and a pension are fundamentally the same kind of designs. The difference in some cases is the pension somebody else is buying and the annuity you're buying. And so when you buy an annuity on a personal level, you're making some decisions that, again, if you had a pension, you wouldn't have worried about so much. there are concerns about those kind of programs. There's concern about their cost. There's concern about the efficacy of the program, the ability to get your money back. There's concern about the person, the entity that you give the money to. Are they going to be around? Are they going to be able to return it to you? Will they change the rules? So there's a lot of that. And interesting, although you hear people say a lot of times, I don't want control. About the time they actually have to sign the check, they sort of decide they want some of that control back, and that impacts how the products are designed and the cost and things like that. That's a long way of saying that these kind of programs, I think, ultimately are what Americans are going to want to have, because they're looking for something that will deliver to them a dependable stream of income in retirement. You can tweak those products, you can do something on the cost, you can deal with some of the approachability elements, but there are a lot of surveys out there that show that Americans are interested in the concept anyway. And so we'll see how that develops.
John is in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, early 50s. John, are you ready to retire?
I'm in semi-retirement right now. My question is around education. I know there's with employers and employees, and I know it's hard to get younger folks excited about retirement and understanding what's going on. And I know there's been some changes in the past few years with regards to education. I'd like to Nevin explain those, and then along with that, where does he see it going in the future? Because I think that's a big part of people at all ages understanding what it takes and how to be prepared and better plan. And I don't see employers really providing that much information to employees to get them to better understand where they need to be.
John, how is it that you are in semi-retirement at the age of 54?
My company let me go, and no one wants me back.
So, okay, all right. So it wasn't a case of saving or making a lot of money necessarily, or was it?
Well, I've done that. I grew up in the business and planned, I think, pretty well. So I'm comfortable. I'm happy. But yes, I'd like to go back to work. But at this point, we're taking it as it goes.
If you didn't go back to work at this point, could you go for another 30, 40 years?
Yes, actually, let's say from my plan from 65 on, I'm fine. Right now, I have the luxury of my wife working, and the big portion of that is really the concern of medical care costs and her health care plan. So having that is a big savings going forward. So, our houses are paid for. I have no debt, so we're in good shape. It's just more of a what to do with your time, so to speak.
All right, that's John in Rocky Hill, Connecticut.
Yeah. Well, let me say a couple things. John's situation is not all that unique. In fact, our retirement confidence survey found that people, and this has been true over a number of years, people are leaving the workforce earlier than they had planned, and not because they found the pot of gold and they're checking out a little earlier than they planned. In a lot of cases, it is because of something negative, either a job situation or some sort of disability, either personal or family member, things like that. So again, when you see a lot of surveys today that suggest that people say, and including the Retirement Confidence Survey, which says that people think that they will work longer, they will choose to work longer, that's certainly a plan. But I would say that based on the realities of the retirees that we've canvassed, it's, again, not something you necessarily should count on. So consider it kind of a plan B. John's question about education is an interesting one. And I would say, first off, I've been in the business more than 30 years now. And part of the problem is we're waiting until people get to work to tell them anything about the kind of things we're talking about here. So except for some side-off classes, junior achievement, business things, for the most part, it's not wedded into the core curriculum of most of our schools. So people don't learn about the importance of saving and budgeting. People don't learn about investments. People don't learn about mutual funds. So people don't understand about the importance of diversifying their investments when they do have them. And so they show up for work, and along with all the other things that they have to learn that first day on the job, they're sitting there, being dumped a 401k brochure that has all this in them, and they'll have somebody stand in front of them for about 20 minutes and throw a lot of numbers at them. That's a hard way to learn and a tough point in your life to learn them. And so I've always thought that getting to people earlier in their lives with some of this information would help them be better savers later on, because they would be past some of the real challenging financial ends of it. And they'd be better prepared as adults. I mean, how much of the problems do we see with debt and some of the things with college debt and things like that are a function just of people sort of getting out into the world and for the very first time in their life actually having to deal with their personal finance. So it's a real problem. And we talk about retirement savings, but honestly, if you roll out of college and you've got $100,000 or $120,000 worth of accumulated college debt, that's going to squeeze out your ability to do any real productive saving for retirement.
Nevin Adams is with the Employee Benefit Research Institute, EBRI.org, where you can read their recent survey on worker savings. Marcia is hitting that magic age of 65 in Decatur, Illinois. Hi, Marcia.
Thanks for C-SPAN. Watch it every morning.
Yes, ma'am.
And my question is, if this Ryan budget goes through and they cut it off at, say, 55, and anyone younger than that on a voucher-type program, if your family member is, say, 50, how much money are they going to have to plan on saving to reach retirement in that system and have a decent retirement? And I don't really need percentages because a lot of people are having a hard time finding work and making, a low living type of standard, like maybe $20,000 a year. And how much money are they going to have to plan to save to retire at a decent retirement for that time period in the future?
Marcia, we'll get a response. Can you give us a snapshot of your personal situation?
Well, in my personal situation, my ex-principal used to tell me I don't need a dissertation, I just need an answer. So I'm going to try to be short as I can be. I worked from 65 and to 91 and paid into Social Security, and then figured out my Social Security is not going to take care of me. And so then I worked my way through college during the upper years of that and became a teacher. And so then I paid into the teacher retirement. And so now, since I'm retired on my teacher pension, Social Security was cut in half because of the windfall profit type tax thing they did. And so then Medicare took half of that. So I'm down to like $100 on Medicare, and then my teacher retirement is basically what I survive on. And it's a livable wage, and I'm glad I took that route. I don't know how anybody in the future is going to live on Social Security benefits, and they better have a good job with some kind of benefits package, because I think with the economy the way it is, most of the jobs that I see are part-time, and they don't offer too much as far as retirement or health care. And health care is a whole other issue I am living with now because I'm on Medicare. Last time I went to the doctor, I was with a nurse practitioner, and the last lady you had on, I was wondering if the nurse practitioners are taking over for Medicare patients. I didn't get to answer that question.
Thank you, Marcia, for your time this morning. Nevin Adams.
Well, Marcia, unfortunately, I can't answer your question because I don't know. I think on the matters of what the cost would be for people who are below 55 on the proposed budget, I think those probably haven't really been fleshed out yet, so I don't know. At some level, I think it's supposed to provide some sort of insurance supplement to help people afford it. But I would say, as with anything else, if it's out in the future, given the way the health care costs are going now, and given the status even of the current Medicare program, if no changes are made to it, some changes are still going to happen. What those are going to be, it's hard to say, but obviously everybody's concerned about it.
Susan, Bradenton, Florida, mid-50s. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Give us a snapshot of your personal situation, and then go ahead and ask your question, if you would, if you don't mind.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not on the high end that everybody else is, but I have been working for a company for 21 years, and I was out in 2008 for breast cancer, and they tell you to save up 6 months worth of savings, in case something happens to you. Well, unfortunately, I was out for 9 months. I'm a single mother. I didn't have a baby till I was 44. I have a 401k, and I rolled over that 401k to finish paying for the rest of the time I was out for breast cancer. And I'm currently out right now because I need 2 knee replacements. I had one in December, and I'm getting ready to have one here shortly in the next couple weeks. I had something happen to my kidneys, so all of that's unexpected. I have a 12-year-old daughter. I own my own home. I do have a 401k. I've done everything that my employer told me to do. Like I said, I've been with them 21 years, and they're a very, very large worldwide company. And now they're telling me that they want me to apply for Social Security benefits. When I've worked for my long-term benefits, I've worked for them.
Mr. Adams.
What kind of long-term benefits? Are you talking about retiree health care or?
Susan, you still there?
They want me to apply for Social Security benefits.
Mm-hmm.
When I have worked 21 years for this company, and now they're paying me long-term disability benefits right now, which of course isn't enough to live on. But you know, I do have savings. I'm a real good saver, and I've made pretty good money working there. But my question is, why would they want me to apply for Social Security benefits at 55?
Thank you, ma'am. If the company is the company required by law to pay disability, long-term disability payments like that she spoke of?
No, I mean, in a lot of cases we're talking about a voluntary situation at all. In fact, many employers don't offer those, don't have any kind of offering on those kind of programs. So it's difficult to get into the particulars of a specific situation. It sounds to me like she's done the right things in terms of setting money aside and taking care of her home and things like that. Again, unfortunately, just like Ida earlier, got a situation where the health care expenses show up, the kinds of things that don't strike everyone, but when they strike someone, they make a big impact. And it is a problem. So, people do need to take that into account.
Nevin Adams has been our guest for the last 45 minutes. EBRI.org is the website if you'd like to see the study on workers' savings and retirement. Thanks for watching the Washington Journal. We will be back again tomorrow at 7 a.m.